Hi, everybody. Did you know that 100% of FDA 510K submissions now require human factors and usability documentation? Yep, 100% of them. Today, I'm here with Matthew Walker. He's our human factors consultant, and we're going to talk about what we've been doing lately on human factors and usability, and we're going to talk about the FDA's new guidance. Matthew?
Fantastic. So I was thinking that we would start this off by just asking, in general, how did Medical Device Academy get involved in the usability process for clients? Because that's separate from the submission process.
Yeah, in 2016, the FDA released a guidance. And normally what happens is the FDA releases a guidance and then you have to comply. But sometimes, and in this particular case, this is one of those times, there was a little bit of a delay between when the FDA released the guidance in 2016 and when they really started enforcing that every submission has some usability documentation in it. And so in 2018, we started seeing the FDA request request for additional information. Could you please provide information? So if the device was just like the predicate in terms of the user interface, the FDA wasn't asking for anything. But then when we started seeing software submissions that had different user interfaces, the FDA started asking for that. And it was around 2018. And it wasn't like a hard date. It was something that started happening gradually. And it might have been, it took the FDA time to train people and implement it internally or figure out when they should and when they shouldn't require it. But that's something that has changed dramatically. Over the last few years, it's become more and more. Every single submission they're asking for it, and now it's mandatory. You can't even physically submit a 510K without it now. But that's how it began. We started out seeing requests for it, and then in 2019, we had a firm that we started partnering with and another firm to help us because we didn't have the resources ourselves. We didn't even have a procedure. I remember we had Research Collective help us with writing a procedure. We had another company, Core Human Factors. They taught at our training courses that we did on 510Ks. And now we've got more people that are trained on human factors on our team, and we can do basically everything.
Mm-hmm. So some of those requests for additional information, those were items like identification of critical tasks, the use-related risk analysis. What sorts of documentation was the FDA asking for?
Yeah, the FDA, the number one thing that surprised everybody was the URRA. They started in the AI hold letters. They would actually give a template example of this is what we want it to be. Companies would submit something that was similar, but not exactly the same. They would add to it what the FDA wanted that was missing from their use FMEA. And the FDA would be like, no. We don't want anything more and we don't want anything less. We want exactly what's in this table.
Yeah. And on the consultant side, we didn't get a peek at the use-related risk analysis format until the following draft guidance.
Yep, exactly. They had a 2022 draft guidance. They gave us a template, and they actually had a couple versions floating around where the titles on the top of the columns were slightly different. But they released a final guidance on June 1st. And that has the final version that they want everybody to use.
Okay, so now that it's finalized, it's a much stronger suggestion that you comply with it. How does the new guidance impact your 510K submissions?
So now, when you go to complete a 510K, whether you're doing an IVD submission, which has one template, the IVD eSTAR, or an NIVD for non-IVD eSTAR, regardless of which one it is, they have a human factors section at the end. It comes after the 3 questions about benchtop performance, animal book performance testing, and human clinical performance. Right after that is a usability section, and it's right before references at the bottom. And that's where they have it in the non-IVD version. In the IVD version, it comes about 10 pages earlier, and it's in the performance section again, but that performance section for IVDs is much earlier for the IVD submissions. But that's where they have it, and it starts out asking you, are you category 1, 2, or 3, or would you like to go into a decision tree? And everybody, it's just sort of like software. Everybody's going to want to claim they're a Class A software, but they're not. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing a 510K. Well, everybody would like to be a category 1 human factors, but unless you are identical to your own device that already has clearance in terms of user interface, that's not going to happen. And you have to explain your decision tree, you have to provide a summary, and you have to provide testing documentation if you're a Class 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm. And that's a new change from the 2016 guidance we've been working off of the last
the 2016 was
now?
How to do the testing. 2020.
So what changes are you
what's needed in this
seeing now in response to the new finalized guidance?
Could you repeat that one more time?
What are the changes you're seeing in response to the new guidance now?
Well, the first question was, where do we put things? Like, because the guidance says attach your pictures of your user interface. Where? There's no attachment button. So you read through the guidance, and it says, tell us what page it's on, or refer to which document it's in, what page it's on, what section it's on. And if you put it in the performance section, which is where we were putting it before, you just need to reference that now. So it's really like they already had a place where they wanted it. They didn't make it any more clear where they want it. They just said, now please tell us which document that you've attached in the performance section we should look at for each of these items we're asking for. And if it's a category 1, then they want a conclusion and human factors summary, which is not something we've ever provided before. And they give you in their new final guidance what should be in that summary and conclusion, so you can write that, and it can be a page, but there's no way you're going to want to write that in the little text box they give you. Yes, it's possible, but why would you bother? It's so much easier to just attach a document in the performance section and say, see this document for that summary. That's one thing. And then if you have a category 2 or 3, then you're providing much more information. One of those things would be a use specification, because the use specification is going to have your users, your user groups, your use environment, your intended use, and a description of the user interfaces. All that would be in a use specification. You could provide each one of those as a separate document. You could attempt to describe them in words in a text box, very inefficient, or you could just create a use specification, which is what the 62366 guidance says, attach it in the performance section, and then say, this can be found on page 1, section 2. This can be found on page 1, section 3, and so on through that section. But they tell you what documentation they want, but they don't really give you much of a breadcrumb on how to do it.
Okay. So that summary and conclusion, is that different from what we had in the 2016 guidance when you had the 8-section validation report you had to submit?
Yes. So the summary and conclusion has very little to do with what we would have in our what we would have had in our report. Our human factors report that has 8 sections, it would ask for all the things that would be in our use specification. It would ask for our methods that we used. It would ask for the rationale for the sample size of participants. It would ask for raw data. It would ask for any changes that we made during any formative testing. But none of those things are actually required in this new summary and conclusions. The only parts that would be common would be the very end, which would be your conclusions. That part would be the same as your report, but they also want a summary explaining why you're a category 1, 2, or 3. We never had that before in the human factors reports. They also want to know whether you did testing or not, and summarize what testing you did, but that wouldn't be in the report because the report is just for that test, not for all the testing. So they're really not asking for a lot in the summary. I got it down to about 3 bullet points. If you provide those, you're going to be in good shape, but it's not the same as what the report was.
Okay, so that was specifically the summative report for the validation testing at the end. Now, is that something that Medical Device Academy helps with?
Yes. So over that period of 2006 or 2018 all the way till now, so a 10-year period basically, we've developed procedures. You've rewritten the procedure at least 3 times. Created all the templates, revised the templates multiple times, submitted them in pre-subs, gotten feedback from the FDA, more edits, submitted actual submissions, made edits, resubmitted them. We've gotten them cleared for multiple clients. So we have a pretty good solid set of procedures and templates that we've used and have been verified by the FDA. This is acceptable. What we were missing until very recently was the ability to actually execute the protocols because we didn't have a facility. Research Collective, Core Human Factors, they had that. We didn't have that. We were a smaller team and we didn't specialize in human factors. Now we found a partner through one of the studies that we were doing with a client. We found a partner that all they do is provide a facility and recruit subjects. We do everything but that. So marrying those two together as a team works perfectly. And you and I were doing that 2 weeks ago, and you're going to be doing it again next week.
Yep, we were down in Raleigh. So can you just kind of describe some of what our summative testing experience looks like?
Yeah. So the summative validation is usually the last step. So anybody that doesn't know anything about human factors, you shouldn't be doing summative unless you're absolutely sure that everything's going to go flawlessly and no errors. The reason why is it's not cheap. It's tens of thousands of dollars. So just our one Raleigh trip and our one Tampa trip, it's a $50,000 expenditure for the client. And we had already done all the documentation and the protocol and all that. This is $50,000 for the part that's the execution, recruiting, and going to the site. Some of that's travel, but a large part of it is like a third of it is we need 2 sites to do it at, and we need the people to show up that we're going to do the summative testing of. But it was you and me showing up. The participants were scheduled by the coordinator of the site. They scheduled each hour slot. So we had somebody at 8, somebody at 9, somebody at 10, somebody at 11. So they had them all racked and stacked for us, and they would sign all the paperwork. They did all the pre-screening for us. They even took care of paying the people. All we had to do is literally give them our pre-screening criteria that they went through themselves and their informed consent so they could have each person sign it. And the people just showed up for us. So it was really helpful. And it was a gorgeous facility. I mean, you could have the client observing in the back room. They did high definition video for us. And we had lots of space, more space than we needed. Enough chairs to play, play a game with them. So it was really nice. And of course, they conveniently, and I'm sure strategically, located next to the airport. So you don't have to worry about, do I need to rent a car? You can just Uber it. You actually feel guilty about doing the Uber because it's just a short ride. So you tip the guy more. It's just a short ride
were like,
over.
What, less than 3 miles from the airport?
Or
from the hotel to the lab?
I think the Raleigh one was 10, maybe. I think it was less than 8 or 9. Okay. From our hotel, it was 1 mile. Yeah. And then Tampa's going to be even closer. Tampa, wow. I think, is under 5.
Okay, so that's what we've been doing recently. But if a client needs help with usability or human factors engineering in general, what is their next step?
So If you need help gathering everything that you have together is important. So if you have a device description, if you have a user manual, those are important because we can't do anything without a device description and a user manual. But you can request a quote. So we actually created a brand new quoting page. It's on the screen. So you just go to medicaldeviceacademy.com/usability-services-quote, or I could just type into our search tool, usability services, and that's the first one that comes up. You fill it in, and it sends an email to Lindsay, and it probably sends one to me as well, saying, hey, we want a quote for usability services. And then we would, and on that quote form, it lists all the things that you could possibly ask for usability services, and you just check the ones that you need. So if you've already done some of the work, you can just check the ones that you haven't done. So if you just needed summative, you could just check the summative. If you just want somebody to help you write a report, you can check that. If you want to do the whole study and you just want somebody to write the protocol for you, you could do that. But the first thing that we need always is that device description and the user manual. And lately what we've been seeing is, oh, this user manual needs a little bit of work because it's not clear step-by-step instructions, or you only have one user group here defined, but you've actually got three, or you've got three user groups, but you only have instruction for one of them. So we look over the user manual pretty closely to make sure it's going to work and what edits it might need. And because you have to identify critical tasks for the FDA, that's part of that URA. You have to identify all your tasks that are critical and non-critical. We need to know what the risks, the possible physical harm is to people from these use errors. So if they don't do something correctly, will it harm them? How bad will it be? And the best place to get that is your risk management file. But companies that haven't got a product on the market sometimes don't even have a risk management file. So device description, user manual, and whatever you've got for a risk analysis, that's where we start. But we can provide any of the documents in the usability engineering file, as well as write your protocol and execute it now. And I actually had fun going to Raleigh, so I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing these, because you actually get to work with a product and you actually get to speak with users and get their feedback, and that's just sitting there and typing things on the computer isn't as much fun as going out there and using the devices.
Right, and one of the things the FDA asks for is geographic variability in the user groups tested. So the lab has 7 different locations across the U.S., right?
Yeah, so I just wrote Raleigh and Tampa here because those are the two. You and I went to Raleigh. You're going to be going to Tampa next week. Rochelle, who's been working with us a lot, one of our consultants, she and Sabrina, another one of the consultants, they went to Orlando, they went to Tampa, and they went to Chicago. So Raleigh, Tampa, Orlando, Chicago, that's 4. There are 3 more. One of them's in Cincinnati, one of them's in Columbus, and one of them's in New York City. So they've got not the whole country covered, but they've got them diverse, and they're all major cities near airports. And that's really like we were describing to the client that we talked with yesterday. The trick is not to say, this is what we don't do, or we didn't cover all this. The trick is to say why we selected the locations we did to try to cover as much diversity as possible. So we pick major cities that are far apart rather than trying to pick, all the sites in Florida, rather than do Orlando and Tampa. By picking Raleigh and Tampa, that gives you a little more diversity. Yes, we could have gone to Chicago instead of having 2 on the East Coast, but Raleigh and Tampa are a good 500 miles apart or so. And that does give you some diversity, and they're 2 very different cities. If anybody's been to Raleigh recently, it's nothing like Tampa. So very different culture, very different people. So that helps give it some of that diversity. But no, you're not going to cover the entire United States, But when you explain your selection of sites to the FDA, you don't start with all the things you didn't do. You start with what you did do to try to achieve diversity and coverage of the U.S.
Yeah. So the rationale for why we believe this is adequately representative is
Exactly.
Another thing we see is you had mentioned some of the information you can pull from the risk management file. We sometimes have clients that come to us that might already be CE marked and have a usability engineering file, or they come to us with a use FMEA, and the FDA doesn't accept a one-for-one transfer of a UFMEA equaling a URRA.
Yep. So if the company already has a usability engineering file and they're CE marked, they might not have a usability study that was done in the US. So that's one of the things the FDA is adamant about. They must have the study be done in the US. They made some exceptions during COVID. They allowed people to do remote studies. They're not going to allow that now. I have had them grant permission for one study in Switzerland, but it was an international conference where more than half the participants in the study were from the US, and it was all done to an international standard for that procedure. And the FDA said yes in a pre-sub. So if you're going to make exceptions, you got to come up with a really good rationale and submit it in a pre-sub to get agreement. But normally they want it to be all done in the US, no exceptions, must be done in person. So that's why we need these 7 sites in the US. So if you've already done all your work in another country, we can take those protocols and convert it over to a study in the US very quickly. If you have a use FMEA, we can convert the columns over to the columns that the FDA wants for a URRA, but there might be a column that we know there will be one column missing, the critical tasks, but there might be other columns that are not as detailed, like the FDA wants to know specifically how you validated each item, and they want to know what question or what task is covering that. So being very clear about the traceability to the task that you observed, or the task that they answered a knowledge-based question on, and how that addresses that risk and how the usability risk control was adequate. That's key. And a lot of people don't have that in a use FMEA. They'll just list usability engineering file, or they'll list summative validation. But the FDA wants traceability to the individual task and the individual knowledge-based question. And that level of traceability is why the URA is simplified to go every line of that table to make sure everyone is traceable back to the risk controls and a test question or a task that was observed. That requires more time on the FDA's part, and that's why they want that traceability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that does a pretty good job of summarizing what we wanted to explain to people. Good luck.
We didn't go wildly over time.
Yeah, we're actually a little under. So thank you very much, and good luck next week in Tampa. And thank you again to Becca for covering for me while my eye's healing. So everybody have an awesome week, and hope to hear from you soon. I'll put that link up there one more time. If you want a quote, just click on or copy that link into your browser, or go to medicaldeviceacademy.com and type in usability services in the search. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.